The transport ship shook violently as it entered the atmosphere of Valoran Prime. Maya Chen gripped the metal bench beneath her, her knuckles turning white. Around her sat 47 other passengers, all dressed in expensive clothing, all carrying official documents, all belonging to wealthy families from across the galaxy. Maya had none of these things. She wore her older brother's jacket, 3 sizes too big, and carried a stolen identification card that belonged to someone who had died 2 years ago. She was 17 years old, an orphan from the mining colony of Dust 7, and she had absolutely no right to be on this ship heading to the most prestigious military academy in known space. The Valoran Imperial Academy accepted only 200 students each year from a galaxy of 800 billion souls. Every student came from nobility, from wealth, from political connections that stretched across star systems. The entrance examination was legendary in its difficulty, but it hardly mattered when 90% of accepted students were chosen before the test even began. Maya had taken the examination on a broken terminal in an abandoned building on Dust 7. She had hacked into the Academy's testing system using skills she had learned from watching illegal data traders in the lower sectors. When her scores came back, she had stared at the screen for a full hour without moving. Perfect marks, every section, every question. The Academy's automated system had generated an acceptance letter before any human administrator could review her application. By the time anyone noticed that Maya Chen did not exist in any official database, she was already on a transport ship, using credits she had stolen from a corrupt mining supervisor who had beaten workers for sport. Now the ship was landing, and Maya felt her stomach twist with fear. She had come this far on luck and desperation. She had no plan for what would happen next. The doors opened with a hiss of pressurized air. Bright sunlight flooded the cabin, and Maya squinted against the glare. She had never seen natural sunlight before. Dust 7 existed in permanent twilight, its sun blocked by clouds of industrial waste. Students began filing out, their expensive luggage floating behind them on anti-gravity platforms. Maya had only a small bag containing 2 changes of clothes, a broken data pad, and a photograph of her parents that she could barely remember. She stepped onto the landing platform and stopped breathing. The academy spread before her like a dream made solid. Towers of white stone rose into a blue sky, connected by bridges of transparent crystal. Gardens filled with plants she had never seen stretched in every direction, their colors so vivid they hurt her eyes. Flying vehicles moved silently between buildings, and in the distance, she could see training fields where older students practiced combat maneuvers. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. It was also completely terrifying. A voice called out names from a list, directing students toward different buildings based on their assigned dormitories. Maya listened carefully, waiting for the name on her stolen identification. When it came, she walked forward on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. An administrator stood at a checkpoint, scanning identification cards with a device that glowed blue. Maya watched student after student pass through without issue. When her turn came, she handed over her card and tried to keep her expression neutral. The administrator frowned. He scanned the card again. Then he looked up at Maya with eyes that seemed to see through every lie she had ever told. Maya prepared to run. She had already identified 3 possible escape routes, 2 security blind spots, and a maintenance shaft that probably led to the building's lower levels. Her heart pounded so loud she was certain everyone could hear it. The administrator tapped his device several times. His frown deepened. Then something strange happened. A second administrator approached, an older woman with silver hair and the rank insignia of a senior officer. She glanced at the screen, raised one eyebrow, and leaned close to whisper something to her colleague. Both administrators looked at Maya. The woman smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had just discovered something very interesting. Maya's identification card was returned to her. The checkpoint barrier opened. She walked through on autopilot, her mind racing through possibilities. They knew something was wrong. They had to know. So why had they let her pass? She did not have time to consider this question. A loud voice cut through the air, and Maya turned to see a young man striding toward her with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in his entire life. He was tall and handsome in the way that expensive genetic modifications made people handsome. His uniform was already perfectly tailored, his hair arranged in a style that probably cost more than Maya had ever earned in her life. Behind him walked 2 other students who looked at everyone else like they were examining insects. The young man stopped directly in front of Maya, blocking her path. He looked her up and down with obvious disgust. His name was Aldrich Vorn, heir to the Vorn industrial empire, and within 5 minutes of meeting him, Maya understood that he was going to make her life extremely difficult. Aldrich smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. He asked Maya where she came from, what family she belonged to, and why her clothes looked like they had been retrieved from a waste recycling unit. Maya said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was often the best defense against people who expected reactions. This only made Aldrich angrier. He stepped closer, invading her personal space in a way that was clearly meant to intimidate. He informed her that the academy was not a place for charity cases and that whatever mistake had allowed her entry would soon be corrected. Still, Maya said nothing. She met his eyes without flinching, and something in her expression made Aldrich take a small step backward. Just for a moment, he looked uncertain, like a predator who had just realized its prey might have teeth. Then he laughed and walked away with his followers. But Maya had seen that moment of doubt. She stored it away in her memory like a weapon she might need later. The first day passed in a blur of orientation sessions and facility tours. Maya kept to the edges of groups, watching and listening more than speaking. She learned the layout of the academy grounds with the same careful attention she had once used to memorize escape routes in the mining colony. She learned other things too. She learned that students came from 47 different species, though humans were the most common. She learned that the academy trained not just soldiers, but scientists, engineers, diplomats, and intelligence operatives. She learned that graduation required passing tests of physical ability, mental aptitude, tactical thinking, and psychological stability. She also learned that she had been assigned to the lowest-ranked dormitory, in the smallest room, with no roommate. This should have made her suspicious, but she was too exhausted to think clearly. When she finally reached her room, she locked the door behind her and collapsed onto the narrow bed. The mattress was harder than anything she had slept on before, but it was clean and warm and safe. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to cry. The next morning, everything changed. Classes began at dawn with physical training. Maya joined 200 other first-year students on a massive field, where instructors began dividing them into groups based on their initial fitness assessments. Maya expected to be placed in the lowest group. She had grown up in low gravity and poor nutrition, and her body showed it. Instead, she was placed in the advanced group. When she asked why, the instructor looked at her with the same strange expression the administrator had worn the day before. The physical training was brutal. Students ran obstacle courses, climbed walls, crawled through mud, and fought hand-to-hand against training dummies that hit back. By the end of the first hour, half the students were vomiting or collapsed on the ground. Maya was not among them. She did not understand why until she noticed that her body was moving in ways it had never moved before. She was faster than she should have been. Stronger, more coordinated. Every challenge the instructors threw at her seemed to slow down, giving her time to analyze and respond. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. After physical training came academic classes. Maya sat in the back of a lecture hall as a professor began explaining advanced theoretical physics. The material was supposed to be challenging for students who had received the best education money could buy. Maya understood all of it. Not just understood it, but saw connections the professor had not mentioned. Her hand went up before she could stop herself, and she asked a question about quantum entanglement that made the professor stop mid-sentence and stare at her. The professor asked Maya to stay after class. When the other students had left, he questioned her about her educational background, her previous schooling, her experience with advanced physics. Maya answered honestly that she had never studied physics formally, that she had only read broken data files she had found in abandoned storage units on Dust 7. The professor did not believe her. He gave her a test, a series of problems that were supposed to be impossible for first-year students. Maya solved them in 15 minutes. Word spread through the academy faster than Maya could track. By evening meal, students were whispering about the girl from nowhere who had solved the Thornton equations in her head. By the next morning, professors from 6 different departments had requested to evaluate her. Maya wanted to hide. She wanted to return to her small room and lock the door and pretend none of this was happening. Instead, she found herself sitting in a sterile white room while doctors attached sensors to her head and asked her to solve puzzles on a screen. The puzzles started easy and became progressively harder. Maya solved them automatically, barely paying attention. Her mind focused on the more pressing question of how long she could maintain her deception before someone discovered the truth. Then the lead doctor made a sound that drew her attention. He was staring at his screen with an expression of complete shock. Maya asked what was wrong. The doctor did not answer immediately. He called over 2 colleagues, and they all stared at the screen together. Speaking in technical terms Maya did not recognize. Finally, the lead doctor turned to face her. He explained that the academy used a standardized scale to measure cognitive ability. The average human scored between 90 and 110. The highest score ever recorded by a student at the academy was 167. Maya's score was 214. Maya did not know what this meant. The doctor explained that it meant she was, as far as they could measure, the most intelligent human being who had ever lived. This was impossible. Maya knew it was impossible. She had grown up hungry and sick and struggling to survive. She had never had access to proper education or nutrition or medical care. There was no way she could be exceptional. There had to be a mistake. But the doctors ran the tests again, and again, and again. Each time, the results came back the same, or higher. That night, Maya could not sleep. She lay in her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to understand what was happening to her. She thought about her parents, dead when she was 3 years old in a mining accident that might not have been an accident. She thought about the years she had spent in orphanages and work camps, treated as less than human by people who barely noticed she existed. Had she always been like this? Had some part of her mind always been capable of extraordinary things, waiting for the right moment to emerge? Or had something changed? Had she somehow been altered without her knowledge? She did not have answers. She only had questions, and the questions were starting to terrify her. The next morning, she was summoned to the office of Academy Director Reyes, the most powerful person on Valoran Prime. Director Reyes was a small woman with dark skin and white hair. She had served in the military for 40 years before taking command of the Academy, and her reputation for seeing through lies was legendary. When Maya entered her office, the director was standing at a window, looking out at the Academy grounds with an expression of deep thought. She did not turn around when she spoke. She said that she knew Maya Chen was not Maya Chen. She knew the identification card was stolen, the credits were stolen. The entire identity was a fabrication created by a desperate child trying to escape an impossible situation. Maya stood very still. She did not try to run. There was nowhere to run. Director Reyes turned to face her. Her eyes were sharp and cold, but not cruel. She asked Maya for the truth, and for reasons Maya did not fully understand. She gave it. She told the director everything. The mining colony, the dead parents, the years of survival in conditions that should have killed her, the hacked terminal, the stolen identity, the desperate hope that somewhere in the galaxy, there might be a place for someone like her. When she finished, Director Reyes was silent for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it was not the smile Maya had expected. The director explained that the Academy had known about Maya since the moment she hacked into their testing system. Their security systems had detected the intrusion immediately, traced it back to its source, and flagged her examination results for special review. They had allowed her to continue because they wanted to see what she would do. They had let her board the transport ship, pass through the checkpoint, enter the academy, and take the cognitive tests. They had been watching her every moment since she arrived. Maya felt sick. She had thought she was clever, but she had been a mouse in a maze the entire time. Director Reyes shook her head. She said that Maya did not understand. The academy had not been studying her as a curiosity or a criminal. They had been studying her because they had never seen anything like her before. The director walked to her desk and activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air between them, medical scans and brain imaging and genetic analyses that Maya could not interpret. The director explained that Maya's brain was different from a normal human brain, not damaged, not mutated, but evolved. Her neural pathways were more efficient, more densely connected, more capable of processing information than any human on record. But these differences were not the result of genetic engineering or artificial enhancement. They were natural. Somewhere in Maya's family history, the director said, there had been an evolutionary leap, a random mutation that had produced the potential for extraordinary intelligence. That potential had been passed down through generations, waiting for the right combination of genes and circumstances to express itself fully. Maya was that expression. She was what humanity could become. The director paused, letting this information sink in. Then she asked Maya a question that would change everything. She asked Maya if she wanted to stay. Maya did not understand. She had broken laws, stolen property, committed fraud. By any reasonable standard, she should have been arrested, deported, and sent back to Dust 7 to face whatever punishment awaited her. The director agreed that by reasonable standards, this was true. But the academy was not in the business of reasonable standards. The academy was in the business of finding extraordinary individuals and turning them into something even more extraordinary. Maya Chen was the most extraordinary individual the academy had ever encountered. The director was not about to let her slip away because of paperwork. There would be conditions, of course. Maya would need to work harder than any other student. She would need to prove herself every day. She would face challenges and obstacles that would make her previous life seem easy by comparison. But if she succeeded, she would graduate with a new identity, full citizenship, and opportunities beyond anything she had ever imagined. Maya thought about Dust 7. She thought about the dark tunnels and the poisoned air, and the people who died young from diseases that could be cured with basic medicine. She thought about the life she had left behind, and the life that was being offered to her now. She said yes. Director Reyes nodded, as if she had expected nothing else. She told Maya that her training would begin immediately, and that she should prepare herself for the most difficult experience of her life. Maya did not know it yet, but the director was not exaggerating. The challenges she would face in the coming months would push her to her absolute limits. She would make enemies and allies, discover secrets that could shake the foundations of the galaxy, and learn the true meaning of the potential she carried inside her. But all of that was still to come. For now, Maya Chen stood in the director's office and felt something she had not felt in years: hope. 3 months had passed since Maya Chen arrived at the Valoran Imperial Academy, and she had learned that being the smartest person in the room was both a gift and a curse. The gift was obvious. Academic classes that should have taken years to master took her weeks. She absorbed information like dry ground absorbed water, processing and organizing and connecting concepts in ways that left her professors speechless. By the end of her first month, she had completed the entire first-year curriculum. By the end of her second month, she was attending third-year lectures and finding them manageable. The curse was equally obvious. Every success she achieved, every test she aced, every problem she solved, became another reason for her classmates to hate her. Aldrich Vorn led the opposition. He had made it his personal mission to destroy Maya, not through direct confrontation but through a campaign of social warfare that was almost impressive in its cruelty. He spread rumors that she was a spy from a rival government, that she had cheated on her entrance examination, that she was a genetically modified experiment escaped from a laboratory. None of these rumors were true. But truth mattered less than repetition. Students who might have been friendly kept their distance. Instructors who should have supported her became cold and formal. Maya found herself increasingly isolated, eating alone, studying alone, walking through corridors where conversations stopped the moment she appeared. She told herself she did not care. She had survived worse than social isolation. She had survived hunger and violence and the knowledge that no one in the galaxy cared whether she lived or died. What were whispers and dirty looks compared to that? But late at night, in her small room with its narrow bed, she sometimes allowed herself to feel the loneliness. It pressed against her chest like a physical weight, making it hard to breathe. The only person who treated her like a normal human being was a student named Kira Tanaka, a stocky girl with bright red hair and a perpetual expression of mild irritation. Kira came from a military family that had served the Empire for generations, and she had earned her place at the academy through skill rather than wealth. She approached Maya in the dining hall one evening, dropping her tray on the table across from Maya without asking permission. She announced that she had heard Maya was either a genius or a fraud, and she wanted to determine which one before making any decisions about friendship. Maya asked what would help her decide. Kira pulled out a datapad and showed Maya a tactical simulation that had been giving her trouble for weeks. It involved fleet movements across 3 star systems, with dozens of variables to consider and no clear optimal solution. Maya studied the simulation for approximately 30 seconds. Then she began explaining the solution, pointing out patterns that Kira had missed, identifying the key variables that mattered and the ones that were distractions, and ultimately describing a strategy that Kira had never considered. Kira listened without interrupting. When Maya finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled and said that she had decided Maya was definitely a genius and definitely strange and potentially someone worth knowing better. From that day forward, they were friends. Kira became Maya's guide to the social landscape of the academy. She explained who could be trusted and who should be avoided, which instructors were fair and which ones had favorites, how to navigate the complex web of alliances and rivalries that defined student life. She also explained something that Maya had been wondering about since her arrival. She explained why Aldrich Vorn hated her so specifically, so personally, in a way that seemed to go beyond simple jealousy. The answer was both simple and complicated. Aldrich's family had controlled the Academy's largest donor fund for decades. This money had given them enormous influence over admissions, curriculum, and even faculty appointments. When Maya arrived with her perfect test scores and her impossible origin story, she represented a threat to everything Aldrich believed about the natural order of the universe. In Aldrich's world, the wealthy and powerful were wealthy and powerful because they deserved to be. Success was inherited, passed down through bloodlines like a precious heirloom. The idea that a nobody from a mining colony could outperform him, could prove that his advantages meant nothing, was intolerable. Maya understood this intellectually, but she could not bring herself to care about Aldrich's wounded ego. She had real problems to worry about. The physical training was one such problem. Despite her unexpected abilities on the first day, her body had quickly returned to its natural state of weakness. She was still the smallest student in her class, still the weakest, still the slowest. Her mind could process combat tactics instantly, but her muscles could not execute them. She worked harder than anyone else. She trained before dawn and after sunset. She pushed her body until it screamed for rest and then pushed it further. Slowly, painfully, she began to improve. Her instructor in hand-to-hand combat was a scarred veteran named Commander Vasquez, a woman who had lost her right arm in a battle and replaced it with a military prosthetic that was somehow more intimidating than the original. Commander Vasquez did not care about Maya's genius or her reputation. She cared only about whether Maya could survive a fight. The first time they sparred, Maya ended up on the ground in approximately 4 seconds. Commander Vasquez stood over her and delivered a lecture that Maya would remember for the rest of her life. She said that intelligence was useful, but intelligence could not stop a bullet or block a blade or save someone from an explosion. The universe was not a classroom. The universe was violent and chaotic and indifferent to how smart anyone thought they were. Maya would need to learn this lesson, Commander Vasquez said, or she would die. Maya learned the lesson. She learned it through bruises and broken bones and the humiliation of being defeated again and again by opponents who were bigger and stronger and more experienced. She learned it through pain and exhaustion and the slow, grinding work of building a body that could keep up with her mind. By the end of the 3rd month, she could last 30 seconds against Commander Vasquez. It was not much, but it was progress. Meanwhile, her academic work continued to astonish everyone who witnessed it. She solved a mathematical proof that had stumped researchers for a century. She designed an engine modification that increased fuel efficiency by 12%. She wrote a paper on political theory that was circulated among the highest levels of the imperial government. The Academy did not know what to do with her. She did not fit into any existing category or program. She was simultaneously the best student they had ever seen and the most difficult to teach. Director Reyes solved the problem by creating a special curriculum just for Maya. She would still attend regular classes for the subjects that challenged her, but she would also receive private instruction from the Academy's most advanced researchers. She would work on projects that were supposed to be restricted to graduates and professional scientists. This arrangement made Maya happy and made Aldrich Vorn furious. He confronted her one evening in a corridor outside the advanced physics laboratory. He had brought his usual followers, 4 students from wealthy families who seemed to exist only to agree with everything Aldrich said. Aldrich demanded to know how Maya had convinced Director Reyes to give her special treatment. He suggested that she was using some kind of manipulation, perhaps blackmail, perhaps something worse. He implied things about Maya's character that made her fists clench at her sides. Maya stood very still and let him talk. She had learned that silence was often more effective than argument, that people who needed to feel powerful usually destroyed themselves if given enough time. But Aldrich was not satisfied with silence. He stepped closer, his face twisted with anger, and said something that crossed a line Maya had not known she had. He said that her parents had probably been criminals too, that they had probably deserved whatever happened to them, that the mining colony should have disposed of her along with the rest of the garbage. Maya moved before she knew she was moving. Her fist connected with Aldrich's jaw with a satisfying crack. He stumbled backward, more surprised than hurt, and his followers immediately moved to surround her. What happened next was something Maya would have trouble explaining later. Her mind seemed to split into 2 parts. One part registered the 4 attackers, their positions, their likely movements, their weaknesses. The other part took control of her body and acted on this information without conscious thought. She ducked under the first punch and drove her elbow into the attacker's solar plexus. She grabbed the second attacker's arm and used his momentum to throw him into the third. She stepped aside from the fourth attacker's charge and tripped him with a sweep of her leg. In less than 10 seconds, all 4 followers were on the ground, and Maya was standing over Aldrich with her fist raised for another strike. She stopped herself at the last moment, not because she did not want to hit him again, but because she realized that half a dozen other students had gathered to watch, and she could see the fear in their eyes. They were afraid of her, not of her intelligence, not of her test scores, but of the violence she had just displayed. Maya lowered her fist and stepped back. She looked at Aldrich, who was holding his jaw and staring at her with an expression that mixed hatred and terror in equal measure. She told him to never mention her parents again, then she walked away. The incident was reported to the academy administration within the hour. Maya expected to be expelled. She had attacked a fellow student, had injured 4 others, had displayed violence that was far beyond anything appropriate for a training exercise. Instead, she was summoned to Director Reyes's office for the second time. The director did not seem angry. She seemed thoughtful, which was somehow more concerning. She asked Maya to explain what had happened, and Maya did. She did not try to justify her actions or minimize what she had done. She simply told the truth. Director Reyes listened without interrupting. When Maya finished, the director was silent for a long moment. Then she pulled up a holographic display showing the security footage of the fight. She slowed it down, frame by frame, and pointed out details that Maya had not consciously noticed. She pointed out how Maya had analyzed the 4 attackers in a fraction of a second and identified the optimal strategy for defeating them. She pointed out how Maya's movements had been efficient and precise, wasting no energy on unnecessary motion. She pointed out how Maya had pulled her final punch, demonstrating control even in the heat of anger. The director said that Maya had natural combat instincts that normally took years to develop. Combined with her cognitive abilities, this made her potentially one of the most dangerous individuals in the academy. Maya did not know how to respond to this. She asked if she was being expelled. The director shook her head. She explained that the academy existed to train dangerous individuals. That was literally its purpose. What mattered was not whether Maya could hurt people, but whether she could learn to control when and how she did so. There would be consequences for the fight, of course. Maya would be required to complete additional discipline training. She would be monitored more closely by instructors, and she would be expected to apologize to Aldrich and his followers, regardless of what they had said to provoke her. Maya agreed to these terms without argument. She understood that rules existed for reasons, and that breaking them had costs. But as she left the director's office, she noticed something that made her pause. Commander Vasquez was standing in the corridor, watching her with an expression that might have been approval. The commander said nothing. She simply nodded once and walked away. Maya returned to her room and sat on her bed for a long time, thinking about what had happened. She thought about the violence she had displayed, the speed and precision of it, the way it had felt almost natural. She thought about Director Reyes's words, about being dangerous, about control. She thought about her parents, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder if there was more to their deaths than she had been told. The mining accident that killed them had always seemed wrong somehow. They had been experienced workers, careful and skilled. The official explanation of equipment failure had never quite satisfied Maya, but she had been too young and too powerless to investigate further. Now she was neither young nor powerless. Now she had access to resources and information that would have been unimaginable on Dust 7. She began to research. It started small, with public records and official reports. She learned the names of the supervisors who had been responsible for safety at the mine. She learned the name of the company that owned the operation. She learned that several other accidents had occurred at the same facility, all attributed to equipment failure, all resulting in the deaths of workers who had been causing problems for management. The pattern was clear once she knew to look for it. These were not accidents. They were murders, disguised as industrial incidents, committed by people who considered workers disposable. Maya should have felt angry. Instead, she felt cold. She continued her research, digging deeper into sealed files and classified databases. Her hacking skills had improved significantly since her time on Dust 7, and the Academy's advanced computer systems made intrusion almost embarrassingly easy. What she found was bigger than she had expected. The company that owned the mine was owned by another company, which was owned by another company, which was ultimately controlled by a name she recognized: Vorn Industrial Empire, Aldrich's family. Maya sat in her room and stared at the data on her screen. She thought about the boy who had insulted her parents, who had suggested they deserved to die. She thought about the possibility that his family had actually killed them. She thought about what she was going to do with this information. The answer came to her slowly, over the course of several sleepless nights. She could expose the truth, could bring evidence to the authorities, could try to achieve justice through official channels, but she knew how that would end. The Vorn family had money and power and connections that stretched across the galaxy. They would bury the evidence, discredit Maya, and possibly arrange for her to have an accident of her own. If she wanted justice, she would need to be smarter. She would need to be patient. She would need to build power and influence of her own, enough to challenge the Vorn family on equal terms. That meant succeeding at the academy. It meant becoming so exceptional, so valuable, that no one could touch her. It meant turning her genius into a weapon that could destroy the people who had destroyed her family. Maya Chen had come to the academy seeking opportunity. Now she had a purpose. She threw herself into her work with new intensity. She mastered subjects she had previously found boring, recognizing that every skill could be useful in the right circumstances. She built relationships with students and faculty, carefully selecting allies who might prove valuable later. She continued her physical training, pushing her body harder than ever before. Months passed. Maya's reputation grew. She solved problems that had stumped the Academy's researchers for years. She developed tactical strategies that were adopted by the Imperial military. She won competitions against students who had been training since childhood, but she also learned to hide. She learned to appear less threatening, less intimidating, less like someone who was planning something. She smiled more and spoke less. She let others take credit for her work when it served her purposes. She became, in essence, a spy in her own life. Kira noticed the change. She asked Maya what was wrong, why she seemed so distant sometimes, why she occasionally stared into space with an expression that Kira could not read. Maya told her part of the truth. She told her about the research, about the connection between the Vorn family and the mining accidents, about her parents. She did not tell her about the plan, about the cold calculations she was making, about the person she was becoming. Kira listened and understood more than Maya had intended to reveal. She said that she would help however she could, but she also warned Maya about the dangers of obsession. She had seen soldiers destroyed by vengeance, unable to see anything except their target until they walked blindly into traps. Maya thanked her for the warning. She meant it sincerely. But she also knew that she would not stop. Near the end of her first year, Maya received an unexpected summons. Director Reyes wanted to see her again, but this time the meeting would include several other people whose names Maya did not recognize. She arrived at the director's office to find it transformed. The comfortable chairs had been replaced with a formal conference table. Around the table sat 5 individuals in military uniforms, their ranks high enough to make Maya's stomach tighten. Director Reyes introduced them as representatives of Imperial Strategic Command, the highest level of military leadership. They had come to the academy specifically to meet Maya. The meeting lasted 3 hours. They asked her questions about her research, her theories, her ideas for solving various strategic problems. They showed her classified information about threats facing the Empire and asked for her analysis. Maya answered carefully, revealing enough to impress them but not so much that she seemed threatening. She had learned the value of strategic understatement. When the meeting ended, the senior officer present, a man named Admiral Chen, who bore no relation to Maya despite the shared name, stood and shook her hand. He said that the Empire needed people like her, and that he looked forward to working with her in the future. After the officers left, Director Reyes remained. She sat across from Maya and studied her with those sharp, knowing eyes. She said that Maya was playing a dangerous game. She did not specify what game or how she knew about it. She simply stated it as fact. Maya asked what the director expected her to do. Director Reyes smiled, and for a moment she looked almost sad. She said that she expected Maya to be careful, to remember that some goals were not worth achieving if they cost too much, and to remember that she had allies who would help her if she let them. Maya thanked her and left. Walking back to her dormitory, Maya thought about what the director had said. She thought about the officers from Strategic Command and what they represented. She thought about Aldrich Vorn and his family and the justice that was still years away. She thought about who she wanted to be and who she might become. The first year ended with examinations and rankings. Maya finished first in every academic category, third in physical training, and second in tactical simulation. Her overall ranking was first in her class, and the gap between her and second place was larger than any recorded in Academy history. Aldrich Vorn finished seventh. His family's influence had kept him from falling lower, but even money and connections could not disguise his fundamental mediocrity. At the year-end ceremony, where rankings were announced and awards were distributed, Maya stood on the platform and looked out at the audience of students and faculty and visiting dignitaries. She saw Kira cheering for her. She saw Commander Vasquez nodding with satisfaction. She saw Director Reyes watching her with that complicated expression she could never quite interpret. She saw Aldrich Vorn glaring at her with hatred that had only grown stronger over the months. Maya smiled. Not a friendly smile, not a triumphant smile, but the smile of someone who knew exactly what she was doing and why. The second year was about to begin, and she had only just started. The final year of the academy began with a crisis that no one had anticipated. Maya was in the Advanced Strategic Planning Laboratory when the alarm sounded. Red lights flooded the corridors, and automated announcements ordered all students to their designated safety areas. Maya ignored the announcement. She had access to emergency communication channels that most students did not, and what she heard made her blood run cold. An unknown fleet had entered Imperial space. Not raiders, not pirates, but a full military armada from a civilization that had not made contact with humans in over 3 centuries. The Kethrani. Maya knew about the Kethrani from historical archives. They were an ancient species, technologically advanced beyond anything humanity had achieved, and they had disappeared from known space after a brief but devastating war with the Empire's predecessors. The war had ended without victory or surrender, simply fading away as the Kethrani withdrew to regions of space that no one could reach. Now they were back, and their fleet was heading directly toward Valoran Prime. The Academy transformed overnight. Training exercises became preparations for real combat. Academic research shifted to military applications. Students who had never expected to fight found themselves drilling with weapons and learning emergency protocols. Maya found herself at the center of attention once again. Director Reyes summoned her to a meeting with the Academy's senior staff and several officers from the Imperial fleet. They showed her the data they had collected about the Kethrani ships, their formations, their apparent capabilities. They asked for her analysis. Maya studied the information for less than an hour before she began to see patterns. The Kethrani fleet was not behaving like an invasion force. Their movements were defensive, cautious, almost fearful. They were positioning themselves to protect something rather than attack something. She shared this observation with the officers, who were skeptical at first. They pointed out that the Kethrani had destroyed 2 human outposts already, killing hundreds of people. That did not seem like the behavior of a species that was afraid. Maya asked for more information about the outposts. Where had they been located? What had they been doing? What had happened in the moments before the attacks? The answers came slowly, pieced together from fragmentary reports and sensor data. Both outposts had been research stations, studying anomalies in deep space. Both had detected something unusual just before the Kethrani arrived. Both had attempted to send data packets to Imperial Command before they were destroyed. Maya asked if the data packets had been recovered. One of the officers admitted that fragments had been retrieved, but the encryption was beyond anything they could break. The Kethrani had apparently adapted human encryption methods and improved them substantially. Maya asked to see the fragments. The officers hesitated. The information was classified at the highest levels, far beyond anything a student should be allowed to access. But Director Reyes intervened, reminding them why they had come to Maya in the first place. The fragments were transferred to Maya's personal terminal that night. She worked on them for 3 days without sleeping, surviving on stimulants and determination. Her mind entered a state she had never experienced before, a kind of focused intensity that burned away everything except the problem in front of her. On the 4th day, she cracked the encryption. What she found changed everything. The outposts had discovered something in deep space, a structure of some kind, ancient beyond measure, and built by a species that predated both humans and Kethrani. The structure was generating energy readings that should have been impossible, power levels that exceeded anything in the known universe. The Kethrani were not invading. They were preventing anyone from reaching the structure. They had destroyed the outposts, not out of aggression, but out of terror. Maya brought this information to Director Reyes, who brought it to the Imperial Command. Within hours, everything changed again. Negotiations began with the Kethrani. It was awkward and difficult, communication hampered by centuries of isolation and linguistic drift. But slowly, painfully, understanding emerged. The Kethrani explained through their translators that the structure in deep space was a weapon. Not a weapon that fired projectiles or generated energy beams, but something far more dangerous. A weapon that could alter the fundamental constants of physics, that could reshape reality itself across entire regions of space. Their ancestors had built it during a war against an enemy that no longer existed. They had sealed it away when they realized what it could do. They had dedicated their civilization to preventing anyone from ever accessing it again. When human research stations had begun approaching the weapon, the Kethrani had panicked. They had come out of isolation for the first time in centuries, prepared to destroy humanity if necessary to keep the weapon sealed. Maya listened to this explanation and felt something she had not expected to feel. She felt sympathy for the Kethrani. They were not monsters or conquerors. They were caretakers, trying to prevent a catastrophe that could destroy not just civilizations, but the laws of nature themselves. She also felt something else, something colder. She felt recognition. The Vorn family had investments in deep space research. They had funded several of the expeditions that had discovered the anomalies, and according to the data Maya had been collecting for years, they had known about the weapon before anyone else. They had been trying to reach it. They had been trying to claim its power for themselves. Maya spent the next several weeks working with both human and Kethrani scientists to develop security protocols for the weapon. She helped design a monitoring system that would alert both species if anyone attempted to approach it. She contributed to treaties and agreements that would formalize cooperation between former enemies. Throughout this process, she continued her private investigation of the Vorn family. What she found was worse than she had imagined. The Vorns had not just been seeking the weapon, they had been preparing to use it. They had built infrastructure, recruited scientists, developed technology specifically designed to interface with the ancient device. They had spent decades and untold resources on a project that could give them power beyond anything in human history. The mining accidents on Dust 7, Maya's parents' deaths, these had all been part of the plan. The mining colony had been built on top of ruins that contained information about the weapon. Her parents had discovered the truth and had been killed to keep them silent. Maya finally had all the evidence she needed. She had traced the connections, documented the crimes, assembled a case that would be impossible to dismiss, but she hesitated, not because she doubted the evidence, and not because she feared retaliation. She hesitated because she realized that exposing the Vorns would destabilize the entire empire at a moment when stability was essential. The alliance with the Kethrani was fragile. If it became known that a major human family had been trying to access the weapon, that the conspiracy extended to the highest levels of government and industry, the Kethrani might conclude that humanity could not be trusted. The alliance would collapse. The war that had been avoided would become inevitable. Maya had spent years planning for this moment. She had sacrificed everything, had become someone she barely recognized, all for the sake of justice and revenge. Now she faced a choice she had never anticipated. She went to Director Reyes. The director listened to everything Maya had to say. She examined the evidence, asked clarifying questions, and sat in silence for a long time when Maya finished. Then she asked Maya what she wanted to do. Maya admitted that she did not know. She had been so focused on reaching this moment that she had never truly considered what would happen after. Director Reyes nodded. She said that this was the true test of leadership, the ability to choose between personal desire and larger responsibility. She said that whatever Maya decided, she would support her. Maya asked what the director would do in her position. Director Reyes smiled sadly. She said that she had faced similar choices during her military career, had been forced to let injustices go unpunished for the sake of larger goals. She said that such choices never stopped haunting her, but she also said that the universe was not fair, that justice was not always possible, and that sometimes the best anyone could do was survive and keep fighting for a better future. Maya left the meeting without a decision made. That night, she walked through the academy grounds alone, thinking about everything that had brought her to this point. She thought about her parents, about Dust 7, about the hungry years when she had dreamed of something better without knowing what that meant. She thought about Kira, who had become the closest thing to family Maya had ever known. She thought about Commander Vasquez, who had taught her that strength was not just physical. She thought about Director Reyes, who had believed in her when she had given no one any reason to believe. She thought about Aldrich Vorn, who was a small and petty person but who did not deserve to have his family's crimes destroy him, and she thought about the Kethrani, ancient and alien and afraid, who had emerged from isolation to protect the universe from a danger that most people would never understand. Maya made her decision. The next morning, she arranged a private meeting with Aldrich Vorn. He came reluctantly, suspicious of her motives and still harboring the hatred that had defined their relationship for 3 years. He sat across from her in an empty classroom and waited for her to explain what she wanted. Maya showed him everything: the evidence against his family, the connection to the weapon, the murders on Dust 7. She explained what his grandfather and father had been doing, what they had been willing to sacrifice, what they would have done to the universe if they had succeeded. Aldrich's face went through several transformations as she spoke. Disbelief became, doubt became horror, became something Maya had never expected to see. Shame. He asked why she was telling him this instead of going to the authorities. Maya explained her dilemma. She explained the fragile alliance, the risk of exposing the conspiracy, the impossible choice between justice and stability. Then she made him an offer. She would keep the evidence secret. She would allow the Vorn family to maintain their position, their wealth, their reputation. In exchange, Aldrich would work to dismantle his family's operations from within. He would redirect their resources toward legitimate purposes. He would ensure that nothing like this ever happened again. And he would fund a memorial on Dust 7, honoring the workers who had died in the accidents that were not accidents. Aldrich was silent for a long time. Then he asked why she trusted him to keep this agreement. Maya smiled. She said that she did not trust him at all. She said that she had arranged for the evidence to be released automatically if anything happened to her, or if the Vorns showed any sign of resuming their previous activities. But she also said that she believed people could change. She said that Aldrich had the opportunity to become something better than his family had been, to make choices that were not determined by greed and power. She said that she was offering him the chance she wished someone had offered her. Aldrich agreed to her terms. Whether he would honor them remained to be seen, but Maya had done what she could. She walked out of the classroom feeling lighter than she had felt in years. The weight of her obsession, the cold calculation that had defined her for so long, seemed to lift from her shoulders. She was still angry. She would probably always be angry. But anger did not have to consume her. The graduation ceremony took place on a beautiful day at the end of the academic year. Maya stood on the platform as her name was called, as her achievements were listed, as the crowd applauded. She was graduating first in her class, with the highest honors the Academy had ever awarded. She had been offered positions with Imperial Strategic Command, with the Science Division, with the Diplomatic Corps. She had more opportunities than she could possibly pursue. But that was not why she was happy. She was happy because Kira was standing in the crowd, cheering so loudly that several nearby dignitaries looked uncomfortable. She was happy because Commander Vasquez had attended the ceremony despite her famous hatred of formal events, and was nodding at Maya with something that looked almost like a smile. She was happy because Director Reyes had given her a hug before the ceremony, breaking protocol in a way that had shocked everyone present. She was happy because she had found a family, not through blood but through choice and struggle and shared experience. After the ceremony, Maya walked through the academy grounds one last time. She visited the places that had been important to her. The laboratory where she had made her first breakthrough, the training field where she had learned to fight, the dormitory room where she had cried on her first night. She found herself at the landing platform where she had arrived 3 years before, a desperate girl with stolen identification and impossible dreams. So much had changed since then. She had changed. She was stronger, smarter, more capable than she had ever imagined possible. But she was also kinder, more understanding, more willing to see the complexity in others. She had learned that being the smartest person in the room was not enough. What mattered was what you did with your intelligence, who you helped, what problems you solved. She had learned that vengeance was less satisfying than she had expected, and that mercy could be a form of strength. She had learned that family was not about blood but about love, about the people who stood by you when everything seemed impossible. A transport ship descended from the sky, different from the one that had brought her here but similar enough to trigger memories. Maya watched it land and thought about all the students who would arrive at the academy in the coming years, some from privilege and some from desperation, all hoping to become something more than they were. She hoped that some of them would find what she had found. She hoped that the academy would continue to transform lives, to offer opportunities to people who had none, to build bridges between species and civilizations, She hoped that the universe would become a little bit better because she had existed. Director Reyes appeared beside her, watching the transport ship with an expression of patient contemplation. She asked Maya what she planned to do next. Maya thought about the question for a long moment. She had so many options, so many paths she could take. She could pursue power, could climb the ranks of the military or the government, could become a leader whose decisions shaped the fate of billions. But that was not what she wanted. She told Director Reyes that she wanted to go back to DUS 7. Not to stay, but to help. She wanted to use her influence and resources to improve conditions in the mining colonies, to give other children the opportunities that she had never had. She wanted to build something instead of destroy something. Director Reyes nodded as if this was exactly what she had expected to hear. She said that Maya had become exactly the person the Academy had hoped she would become. Not just a genius, not just a weapon, but a leader who understood that true power came from service rather than domination. She said that Maya would always have a place at the Academy, whether as a teacher or a researcher or simply as a friend. And she said that Maya's parents would have been proud. Maya felt tears forming in her eyes, but she did not try to stop them. She had learned that tears were not weakness, that showing emotion was not failure. She thanked Director Reyes for everything, for believing in her, for protecting her, for giving her the chance to become who she was meant to be. Then she walked toward the transport ship, toward the future she had chosen. Behind her, the Academy stood tall against the sky, its white towers gleaming in the sunlight. It was a place of transformation, of impossible dreams made real, of ordinary people discovering that they could be extraordinary. Maya Chen had arrived as a girl who was not supposed to be there, a mistake in the system, an error that should have been corrected. She left as a legend, but more importantly, she left as someone who knew exactly who she was and what she wanted to do with the gifts she had been given. The universe was vast and complicated and often cruel. It was full of problems that seemed impossible to solve, injustices that seemed impossible to correct, suffering that seemed impossible to end. But Maya had learned that impossible was just another word for not yet done. She had work to do. She had people to help. She had a universe to improve. One small step at a time, and she could not wait to get started.